Invite our stellar panel to step up. Chris Baker's just arrived from the Siam Society, where he was consorting with the enemy, but we'll forgive him for that. Have you had nothing to eat yet? You sure you're okay? So, if I could invite everybody to join me, Kun Surin. Jeffrey?
It's still here.
All right. This is one of those impossible programs. We're taking a look at Thailand, China, and the Thai Chinese. And quite frankly, the subject is just so incredibly enormous that we could be here for a week and not get around it. So we're extremely lucky to have 5 people who know a great deal about different aspects of this very special relationship in Southeast Asia. This evening also has 2 books behind it. One of them is The Dragon's Pearl, which is Kun Surin Pattanathai's memoirs of her time in China. This is the edition from 1994, which Simon & Schuster. It's been reissued once in paperback, as far as I know.
No, 4 times.
4 times. Sorry, corrected. 4 times in paperback. It's an absolutely extraordinary story. If you get your hands on it, read it. It's another world. And close to home, we have A History of the Thai Chinese, which is a recently produced book by EDM, the Singapore publishers. And we have the 2 authors here to talk about it. And before I introduce our speakers, I'd also just like to acknowledge the fact that we have in the audience tonight Kunanan Panyarachun, who everybody knows as a former Thai Prime Minister, but he also has a very strong link to China. He was the permanent representative of Thailand from the mid-60s through to the mid-70s. And in 1975, he was recalled following the Mayaguez incident, and when Thai-American relations were at quite a bad ebb, and was sent up to Beijing to negotiate the formal signing of relations with China, the PRC, which is in fact was the opening of relations because the connection with China was cut in 1949 after the thing. So Kunanan has an amazing story in there, and also it goes much further back with complexities in New York, negotiating with figures in the Chinese diplomatic circuit. Anyway, you're very welcome this evening. Thank you for joining us. So Kun Surin Pattanathai is going to kick off, and what I will do is introduce people as we go along, otherwise it will take too long. Surin's story is quite extraordinary. She went to China in the 1950s during the Pibun Songkran period and lived there. So her history is a history of modern China and how it evolved. And I don't want to steal your thunder, Kun Surin, so I'll let you carry on. We will also be showing some footage from that period, from the early 70s and the first Thai delegations to visit the PRC after that. Kun Surin, welcome.
I'm very honored to be with you tonight to share some of my experience, my childhood perhaps, with you all. I'm the fruit of peoples to peoples diplomacy. You hear? I was only 8-year-old, and it was an accident for me to go to China, because my father has planned to send only my brother, my second elder brother, to China, because he has the same name, or the name given to him by our Prince Wan Wai, who was our foreign minister at the time of People Songkram government. It all came about in 1959, the Bandung Conference. I think it was easy to talk about Bandung Conference today, but at the time, Thailand was in the midst of Cold War, and we had taken the side fully with the Americans, the West, and the other side is the socialist camp, which was led by the Soviet Union, and China was in that camp. And the Bandung Conference was quite an eye-opening, because from the Thai government, the reason of going there at all was just to observe China, because China had been quite worried for the Thai government at the time from our national security point of view, because China is big and it was communist at the time, and so the government didn't quite know how this new government would be, the communist government, and there were a lot of pain, a lot of saying about China, how it was hooligans, or all coming from the jungle or whatever. So that was actually, my father had been working as advisor to Marshall people for quite some time, and he had been very interested in China, because purely from the national security point of view, because China was so close to us, and we have a lot of Chinese overseas in Thailand, so that was a natural cause of concern. So father had been advising Marshall people on China, that since we didn't know China, it's better to find a way to understand it, or to get in touch with them somehow, because they are so close to us. That was the starting point of the people government to send our foreign minister, Prince Wan Wai, to Bandung Conference, which was then for the non-alliance countries. That was soon after the Second World War. And it was, that meeting was a kind of eye-opening for Prince Wan Wai, because as I said before, we all expected China to be quite a hooligans and uncivilized, and so when Prince Wan Wai went there as an observer, we were not even part of the non-alliance countries. He tried, because the actual mission was to get closer to China. So with his diplomatic skill, he and Zhou Enlai both have that skills. They found a way to be in touch, and Premier Zhou Enlai had invited him to his private residence in Bandung, and that was the beginning of new policies towards China in the People Songkram's government. So Prince Wan Wai came home to Bangkok and said to my father, and of course reported to Prime Minister People, that who said Zhou Enlai was a hooligan. He was just like any of our, the princes of the world, because this is he said he was a very refined Mandarin. So from that point on, my father started to work of how to break this thick wall between us, because we were in a situation that normal diplomacy could not work. So father was thinking of a roundabout way. Maybe we could do some kind of a secret contact, because Thailand was in a very precarious situation with, I think, with the Cold War and with the need that we had from the American support and help to Thai economy and so on. So we 100% then were on the side of the Americans. Now, how we could do it, that we could start our own path without offending our biggest ally or our biggest, aid that we had been receiving. And that was the beginning of what's in the book you talked about. Slightly mentioned that there were two young children sent to China in the time of People Songkram. That was me and my brother. Yeah. So I said it was an accident because my father had meant to send my elder brother, the second elder brother, who bore the same name as Prince Wanwai, to remind Zhou Enlai that of the Bandung conference, of the good meeting they had together and the goodwill and so on. I think Zhou Enlai made a tremendous impression on Prince Wanwai at the Bandung conference. The way he talked about China policy, the way, the 5 principles and so on, that was very impressive for the Thai counterpart. And therefore my father went back as far as the historic our tradition, that our small, like us, a small nation, we could using the children to be brought up or to be in the hands, in the care of the bigger nation. That was an old tradition, and father revived that to try to get closer to China. Now, the path that father could get in touch with China was very, tortuous, very complicated, but I wouldn't go into that. But I think in the end, they were able to be in touch because father sent a secret delegation to China in 1955 and 56. And in fact, in 1955 December, there was an official delegation led by Premier Pibul to Burma to visit Prime Minister Unu. There was an official visit. In that visit, there was my father and chairman of the Krungsi Yuttaya Bank. He was the key person to get in touch with China for father. And in that mission, father met, with the Chinese representatives, and then signed the 5 principle declaration to be for the peaceful coexistence with China and cooperation. That was signed with the Chinese ambassador in Burma in 1955 in December. So based upon that, we started, father and Zhou Enlai started a very direct personal relationship with exchange letters, which we still keep until today. I think in that one of those correspondences, father had mentioned about Prime Minister Pibul and himself would like to send the children to be under the care of Zhou Enlai. And in the letter, you still saw the warmth expressed by Premier Zhou Enlai to welcome the children to China. Now, at the beginning, my father wanted to send only, I said always that, because it was such an accident to my life, because I really didn't know where we were going, where I just was in the car listening to mother and father discussing my brother was going to go on a plane and so and so. You know, we were in 1956, and at the time, not many children been on a plane. And I just wanted to go on a plane so that I could come back and show off to my girls at school. And that was all. And so I said to my parents, I wanted to go, I want to go, you know. So in the end, they looked and they thought it might not be a bad idea, because to have, you know, to have a son there, rather to have, you know, two children together, they could accompany each other or something. And that was how it happened. And it was all kept very secret. I didn't know where we were going. I thought when you took the plane, like, you know, my father often went to Switzerland for the ILO meeting every year and came back with beautiful presents, with beautiful scenery of Switzerland, London, or whatever. So that was what the plane took you. So, so anyway, when we got down, that was very. Therefore, we got on the plane. You know, that was a 4 propellers plane that we went to Burma. We had to go to Burma, and we were received by the Burmese ambassador. And I still remember we saw the cartoon. They made great effort entertaining me and my brother. And my brother was somewhat older and very formal, because before we left, Grandpa Pibun at least told him that he would be his representative and he had to behave. But for me, I wanted to go on a plane. So therefore, when we were at the embassy, I remember they showed a cartoon. I fell asleep, and so we came back, and the next day we went to China on a special plane, military plane. I think on the plane there was me, my brother, and we had 4 kind of bodyguards who took us to China from Thailand. Poor guys, they were in their 30s and they got stuck in China with me for the next 10 years or something. But anyway, they went with us, and we got to China. And the first stop was Kunming, and I thought it was, what? You know, to see all that, everything was in dark colors, and that I couldn't tell the differences between women and men, and you know, they all dressed the same with hat at the time, with the cap. You know, you really wanted to get back the next day. And anyway, so we went on. We had grown-up people to keep us in place, and so on. And so then we got to Beijing. So that was one part of it, that we started that journey. And to me, it was an accident. And I was very disappointed about China. Beijing was just absolutely, dirt, small huts, you know, like in Thailand. That was really, everything was dark, and I was very unhappy there. So, and until I think 1 month after we got there, we met John Lai. And there, I remember, we went on to, they took us, because we were staying in a Peking hotel. And the palace of Zhongnanhai was just next to it. So they took us into a car. And when the car got to the big gate, you know, you were so small, but when you saw that huge gate, and you saw the soldiers standing there, and so I was very impressed. I thought we came to the right place now. And so we just went, and Zhou Enlai was waiting for us in front of the footstep, and I had a picture with Zhou Enlai here, but that was when I was older. That picture we had when I was 8-year-old, I didn't have. It was taken away by the Red Guard. So this is when I was 12 or something in 1960. This was in his home. So I think Premier Joe and you know, I remember, I think it's going too long now. We are not yet in 1950, not yet coming to 1950.
We do need
So
to move along.
I cut short. There are many funny episodes with Joe and Lai. But I want to tell you one thing, because he came to see us, and he has such a talent, such a touch with children. And so he picked me up, and then we went into the, you know, my brother thought, well, this would be his time to show that he was the representative from the, you know, Prime Minister of Thailand. He was only 12, dressed up in shark skin, you know, jacket and so on, and had his notes, always taking notes. I don't know what he took, because master people gave him a Parker pen. So that what happened to him. He always notes something, and he was very serious. But I, you know, he picked me up, and I just loved his look. So we went in, and then Joe and I started to talk about how do you like China and so on. So my brother was, because we prepared before whether we would why first and we would shake hand. You know, at the time we didn't know what handshake was, but my brother knew better. So he said, you got to shake hand, but we wipe first. But when we saw Joe and Lai, we forgot all that completely. You know, I just went in and ran into him. He picked me up, and he was as natural as anything. So my brother didn't practice all that he had practiced, and he was angry with me because I broke his protocol. And anyway, so we went in, and Joe and Lai was asking, one of the questions he was asking me was, how do you like China? So my brother was kind of starting to answer. I got in and said, ball stiff, and I could see he wanted to kick me. When Joe like burst out laughing, and that saved me. So I gave him a look. You see, I think that was the beginning of my very close relationship with Joe and Lai. And 2 years after that, there was a coup d'etat in Thailand. My father, together with, he was also a journalist, proud to be a journalist as profession. He together with 1,000 people, intellectuals and you know, journalists and so on, were put in jail. Actually, there's so many of them, they had to build a new prison for them as a political prisoner. That was the Lad Yao that you have today, the prison. And so they were all there, and so I think until 1958, after there was this coup d'etat and so on, so my brother thought, that's it, our mission has, you know, accomplished, we finished. Our father no longer in power, grandpa people no longer in power, so we could go home. So when Joe and I came to our house, actually he prepared a Manchu courtyard for us, and we had been living there for a year with all the staff and so on in the house, because that house actually was a kind of representative house or reception house for all the secret Thai, you know, Navy, Luang Chien, Lagoon, and so on, all went to China and would pass by to look at us, and also like Kun Chot, the MP, all passed by the house. So it was kind of a reception house, and we were there. And very beautiful. Joe and I made the whole renovation for us to live there in the winter as well, and the Russian, what do you call, the heater was that height, and so that we could be warm in the winter. And anyway, so after the coup d'etat, we wanted to come back. So that was when Joe and Lai said, you're going to stay here. You only would add more problem to your father. He was, my father had chosen to stay in Thailand and go to prison rather than accepted the Chinese invitation to take refuge in China. And Zhou Enlai respected him for that. So he said he would keep his children. And he said to me, I would take care of you as much as your father would. That was his word. So he would not agree that we come back. And that was the time in my life I started another kind of life for the next, say, 8 years in the palace of Zhongnanhai as part of Zhou Enlai's family. And that was now, if you look back, this was a great fortune in my life to be able to. That's why when the Chinese government recently made the history of peoples to peoples diplomacy of China, People's Republic of China, I was the first one, the first episode out of 8 episodes that they are making. Because without the first one, me there, I was one of the very few, apart from Thananan, who had met Zhou Enlai, Mao Zedong, the first leader, and still alive. And but me, I had lived partly with them. So I think this has been a fortune in my life. And in that 8 years that within the wall of Zhongnanhai, it was another world. We had, I want to cut it short, okay? Well, if I had, 60 years, everybody is celebrating 40 years relationship between Thailand and China. My family and myself, my grandchildren were in China last month to celebrate 60 years of our relation with China. That is our family relation with China. My son is called Zhou, after Zhou Enlai. He was born the year Zhou Enlai passed away. Very sick. And Zhou Enlai had kept his little Zhou photograph on his sick bed. And my second son called Leo, he was Liu Chengzhi, named after Vice President Liu Chengzhi, who was also his father was the right-hand man of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, a long line in the Chinese history. Anyway, so I think we had been through 8 years in the palace of Zhongnanhai. I had been another 3 years in the countryside and the downtrodden places in China during the Cultural Revolution. My father came to China just so unfortunate. My father and Zhou Enlai never met in their life. But they respected each other, they loved each other, they trusted each other. Trusted so much that they trusted, my father trusted, my mother trusted their children to Zhou Enlai. And so when, I think when Zhou Enlai was, at the time my father came out after 8 years in prison, came out to, the first thing he would like to do is to visit his children in Beijing. So before he came, he met with the American, chargé d'affaires here, or political counselor came to see him. And he would like father, this was 1967. He would like father to take a message from President Johnson to China. It was the same message that Kissinger had taken 4 years later. My father was 4 years too early, came at the time, during the time that Zhou Enlai was put away by the Red Guards. In that 2 months that he was put away, my father arrived. So the result was he was American, he was, accused of being American spies and whatever it is, and was deported out of China, including my brother together. I was left alone in China, and that was when I had to hide myself in the deep countryside, in a factory. I was a textile worker and so on. But anyway, all that came, that part of a sadness in my life, 3 years, I lost my memory. But I think when I was going to write The Dragon's Pearl, very famous because it was published in New York by Simon & Schuster. They sent a name, a very well-known psychiatrist to me and said, would you like to open that black box that you lost that memory? I said, keep it there because obviously I live well, I'm happy. So why bother? You know, if I don't remember here, there, whatever, it's you know, I'm okay. So the book was patchy in some parts, but I think this is after we came through, then there was so when Zhou Enlai could come back into power again in 1970, he asked me to leave China. China was not the place he could give me any more security. That was in the time that Lin Biao was taking a very high position, and he was in big difficulty himself. So finally I had because the Red Guard took everything, every piece of my belonging in my house, that grand mansion where all 130 PLA was living in my house. So they destroyed everything. My pictures with Mao Zedong, with Zhou Enlai and all that. We still have kept a few very precious historic documents, handwritten by Zhou Enlai, many things, because my mother kept them in Bangkok. And in the time of Sarit, the military dictatorship rule, my mother had to hide them in a plastic bag, in a jar, and bury it underground. That's why we had them today. And I'm going to make a family museum with China. And we got a lot of support from China. And I think so when in 1970, when I came out, Zhou Enlai, I had no identity, I was stateless, I had no passport and nothing. So Zhou Enlai wrote to Heath, Prime Minister Heath in London, and gave me a travel document to identify that I was a Thai, and I was under his care, and now she was going to England to get married. I had an English boyfriend. And he said to me, whether you love him or not, just get out of here, you know. And the easiest is you go and get married. So anyway, that was what happened. And so we got to England, but for 4 years, and you know, my parents never knew where I was. I was dead or alive. They had no news at all. Father came, when I went out, Zhou Enlai sent news to Bangkok and said I was safe, but in England, but no other news. So father came twice to London to look for me and couldn't find me, through M4 or Scotland Yard. They all helped him, couldn't find me because I changed names. I married, so I was called Mrs. Horn instead of Patanotai. So they couldn't find me. And then through the American CIA, they found me 4 years later in England, yeah. And those were the stories. Anyway, then my father came to London, and the first thing he said was that America and China will have to get together, otherwise the world will have no peace. And I thought he stayed too long in prison, you know, to talk something like that in 1971 about China and America getting together. It was impossible. But that was what happened. And then Zhou Enlai played a very clever, you know, we play peoples to peoples diplomacy. Zhou Enlai continued to get China out of the doldrum, out of isolation by playing ping pong diplomacy. His famous dictum was to let the small ball, you know, turn around the big universe or turn around the big earth. And that was what happened. From that inviting, the long hair American ping pong boys, they play ping pong to China in 1971. That was a big hit, and Nixon got the message, So that was how the secret diplomacy went on through, with Kissinger going to China through Pakistan. And it was very interesting because we had John Huntsman a few years ago, former ambassador to China, American ambassador to China. When he came to, we were very close. He was going to run for the president then. So anyway, he said to me, you and I, we had something overcrossing. Because in 1971, he was taken by his dad, John, the old John, to the White House, because they were probably the Republicans. And then he saw, when he was walking out, he saw Kissinger coming out from his room. So he said to his son, this young John, he was 11, and he said, hey, you go and carry that portfolio, because Kissinger was carrying portfolio. And then Kissinger said, hey, you better be very careful with that. And then he told old John, I'm going to Pakistan, to China. So that's how, in a sense, our path had crossed without knowing each other. And so anyway, in 1972, my father, we thought he would have been scared of China now, had nothing to do. That's what I thought myself. I would finish with China now. My goodness, I'm out of China and all the trouble. London was so quiet. It was so, Then my father came, sent my brother, the one who was in China, to London and said, we would like you to get, within a week, to get our ping pong team to China. That was the first, that was in 1972, because he had done a lot of work with Marshal Tanom and Prapat through Kun Prasit Kanchanawat, his close friend, to relaunch the dialogue after Nixon had visited China in 1972, February 1972. So he had this, he's a political animal. So immediately he got the message that the world is going to change and Thailand should be in it. So he sent my brother and one of the member of parliament to London to meet me and asked me to arrange within a week invitation for the ping pong team of Thailand. We never officially visited China for the last 20 years. So I quickly got in touch with the ambassador through that, with Zhou Enlai directly, and within 2 days we got invitation for the ping pong team. But moreover, the most important thing was on that delegation, it had been approved internally that Mr. Prasit Kanchanawat would be the advisor to the ping pong team and, to go with the ping pong team. And that was when we going to organize a secret mission between him and the Chinese leaders to meet for the first time to talk about relationship, how to reopen the diplomatic relationship, which later on came Tan Anand in 1975. Mom Kukrit went to China to sign the diplomatic in 1975 relationship with Thailand and China. So I think the 1972, we call it the door opening. We, after all, Zhou Enlai my father had brought us up, mainly Zhou Enlai brought us up to be the bridge between the two countries. And he was so happy that night, 2 o'clock in the morning, when he received us. You could see in the video in a minute. It was filmed by the Xinhua agency, who follow our 3 people delegation to China. And I was not officially known then by the delegation, and Prasit went there as advisor. Nobody knew, but he never went there, not even for one match of ping pong. He was always with me, meeting with official people, ministers and so on. So we had covered the broad basis of the relationship between the two countries as a first step.
Kun Surin, can we'll call a halt at that point because we've got the footage of the visit,
Yeah,
so
okay.
we can actually see Prasit. And what I suggest we do is run that footage in the background because it's all subtitled, so it'll be self-explanatory. And then we'll move along.
I think I'm more or less finished.
Yeah, but I mean that's the highlight. It's Prasit's visit, and we'll see the footage of that. Is it running? Where's the technician? I'm being waved at. And whilst that's coming up, I'm going to introduce Kun Wasana so that we move along because there's other stuff to cover. Kun Wasana is from Chulalongkorn University, and she's one of the leading authorities on the Thai Chinese, and has written a section in the Cold War, Dynamic of the Cold War in Asia, on the ethnic Chinese in Thailand. Kun Wasana, let's not have it too dark. You're going to talk about the diaspora and how things are. Can you not switch the lights down and keep the volume down? I'm going to lose control of this otherwise.
Oh, fine.
Okay, so we'll just run that on the screen and you'll see Kun Prasit's visit. Volume down. It's just music.
It's very Chinese.
Yeah, very sure.
ขอไฟหน่อยก็ดับเสียง
Okay, Rum, can you just turn the volume down? Get the.
ดับเสียงหน่อยนะ
So Kun Wasana, sorry to all this confusion. Well, this is going to go on for ages, but the footage comes up and it is actually very interesting.
That was when the ping pong team leaving Thailand. It's our Thai international. คุณท่านชุมพลโลหะชละ
So in those days you couldn't fly to
No,
Beijing
you had to
directly,
go
you
to
had to
Hong
go through
Kong.
Hong Kong. All the flights were.
And get another stamp for the visa. Separate piece of paper. Thai embassy had Rolls Royce. Not embassy, consulate. That was กัวมัวรั่ว ท่านอนันต์พบหรือเปล่าคะท่านกัวมัวรั่วท่านกัวมัวรั่วท่านกัวมัวรั่วนั่นคุณประสิทธิ์ไง
This is Prasit.
This is in
That's
the
my brother. He always very serious.
and this is in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. That is
This
Prasit.
is
Yeah.
Prasit การเสนอ
That was the ceremony. It was very communist. It was just like the North Korean today. No? That's me.
So this ping pong diplomacy involved people, ping pong teams from all over Asia. I think there were about 20. Am I correct?
Yeah.
That were brought in. So it was a huge initiative.
An American ping pong
Yeah,
team.
and there was an American team there as well. That's
See,
Joe and
look
I.
at Premier Joe. That was 2:00 in the morning. That's me. My brother, he was very happy to see us. หานเนี่ยหลง At the time, Joe and I prefer to have me to translate for him and for the Thais. My brother always took notes. Not the same pen though. Look, he said, I brought up those kids. He said that. He would make that hands.
Okay, I think that's enough. Can we cut now and move along? Sorry, Weston, I have sort of a very strange.
Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry about that.
How does one follow that act? Thank you very much.
We're about to find out now.
Yes, for kindly inviting me and with a very kind introduction. I really feel worried about the field of Chinese history in Thailand and the history of the overseas Chinese. If I'm the leading authority, I think we're in big trouble. So, but anyway, Kun Sirin talked about people-to-people diplomacy, and I would like to talk about a slightly different sort of people-to-people relations, namely the Thai Chinese, the overseas Chinese, the ethnic Chinese in Thailand, and their history and their role in the relationship between Thailand and the Chinese state. I will try to keep this within the minutes that I have. From my humble opinion, I think there are two monumental pieces on the history of the overseas Chinese in Thailand. And the first one is G. William Skinner's Chinese Society in Thailand and Analytical History, which came out in 1957 with Cornell University Press. The second monumental piece is A History of the Thai Chinese by Jeffrey Sung and Pinpapai Pisarabu. And if any of you haven't don't own a copy yet, shame on you, and you should run off to the back and get one right away. And I would like to talk a bit about the changing nature of the ethnic Chinese in Thailand and a phenomenon that I think just came about after the conclusion of the Cold War. Something that, in fact, as late as the beginning of the dawn of the 21st century. And first, let me bore you to death with Skinner. He's not boring, I'm boring. So I'm going to talk about his main thesis. So Skinner in Chinese society in Thailand and some of his other works on the history of the Thai Chinese and the overseas Chinese in Thailand, Skinner has this idea of the fourth-generation assimilation. And he says that there's no such thing as a fourth-generation Thai Chinese. Like the overseas Chinese, the ethnic Chinese in Thailand are no longer Chinese after 4 generations. They become completely assimilated. They become Thai. There have been many works both supporting this idea and questioning this idea. The debate has been going on since the 50s and still ongoing. I think there's a lot of problematic things with this theory because it's not very clear what this idea of assimilation is, what it means to assimilate completely and become Thai. And from my point of view, I think Skinner actually has a background as he worked mainly on China first. He was a Chinese sociologist. And he only started working on the overseas Chinese in Southeast Asia, especially in Thailand, after he was thrown out of China. So I kind of feel that from Skinner's idea of assimilation is a very China-centered idea. Basically, for the Thai Chinese to assimilate fully and become Thai, it means they lose Chinese characteristics. but there's not really clear what kind of Thai-ness they acquire to become Thai. And I think this idea that they're no longer Chinese within 4 generations is also problematic because it assumes that all the other non-Chinese Thais are the same, which we know is not the case. We also have a lot of different other ethnic minorities in Thailand as well. But anyway, that having been said, I think there's one interesting point that could be used as a standard for perhaps what Skinner means by this assimilation. And that is, if any of you have read Chinese Society in Thailand, which I think everyone has. Yes, thank you. You might feel that it actually reads more like Chinese Society in Bangkok. And even if they mention prominent Chinese personalities in Thailand who are not in Bangkok, they have to have very close relations with the power center in Bangkok. They have connections in some way. They have to serve the court, like the leading Chinese in the south, like the Naranong family, the Nat Songkhla family. Even if you're not situated in Bangkok, you have to be very connected to the government in Bangkok to be somebody. And I think this also goes for the other most prominent work on the Thai Chinese, which is a history of the Thai Chinese. If you look at the images of these prominent Thai Chinese on the cover, you would see that most of them are either in Bangkok or related to the central power in Bangkok. And what I'm saying is that, so this assimilation in some ways might mean to be able to forge an alliance with the central political power in Bangkok. So that if you're going to be somebody after 4 generations, you would definitely have forged a meaningful relationship with the center of power in Bangkok. And if you haven't by the 4th generation, then you're nobody. You might be in jail or you might be persecuted or something. You join the Communist Party and it's just not good. So people we know about, people who have documents about, people that we see in museums or in history research are usually people who have this connection with the central power. And then there has been a transformation lately. My current research, which I would spend 3 minutes talking about, I look at 2 specific Chinese museums of ethnic Chinese. One is at Wat Trai Mit at Yawarat, the Yawarat Heritage Center. And the other one is the Chinese Museum in Udon Thani. The Chinese Museum in Udon Thani had just been established about 2 years ago. The one in Yawarat is slightly older. The interesting thing here is that if you go to the museum in Yawarat and you go to the museum in Udon Thani, you would see that they're very different. Has anyone here been to the museum at Wat Trai Mit? Yes. Thank you very much. You would agree with me, and you could support me on this, that I think it's the most royalist museum in the entire country. And this country usually tends to have royalist museums. So when I say that the Yawarat Museum is the most royalist museum in Thailand, I'm saying a lot. But it is, because in the 6 displays in the Yawarat Museum, of the 6 displays, 4 displays are about the relationship between the members of the royal family and the monarchy with the Chinese community. So it's almost like you cannot have the history of the overseas Chinese in Yawarat without talking about the royal family, the monarchy. But if you go to Udon, on the other hand, it looks more like an ancestral shrine. In fact, it's an extension of the Udon ancestral shrine, and it reads more like a who's who in the Udon economic, financial circle, the leading personalities in the business world in Udon. Very little mention of anything related to the royal family or the central power in Bangkok at all. only after the coup that they had an installation up showing that Her Royal Highness Princess Pacharakittiyapha inaugurated the museum. Before that, there was no mention of anything, for obvious reasons. So I'm looking into this very different representation, and what I see is that after the end of the Cold War, and in fact recently, within the past decade, what we have here is, of course, the fruit of not only China opening up, but China becoming a superpower and kind of becoming very influential in world politics and the world economy. And also the expansion of ASEAN to include countries that used to be our enemies in the Cold War. So the countries in the socialist bloc, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and also Burma to a certain degree. And yes, Myanmar. And what happens is that within the past 10 years, Udon has rise up to be a sort of a center of its own, and it has benefited greatly from investment, both from China in the greater Mekong sub-region, and also business across the Mekong and with Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Myanmar. So that in this century, you start having a phenomenon where you can actually tell the history. There's a new narrative of the Thai Chinese, of the ethnic Chinese in Thailand, that does not have to be connected with the central power in Bangkok. This could not have happened without the rise of China in the world economy and the expansion of ASEAN. So that's one major part of what I'm seeing in the sort of the new narratives, the new post-Cold War narratives of the history of the overseas Chinese. But one last point, which is important that I want to talk about, is that despite this different narratives of the Thai Chinese in Bangkok, in Yaowarat, being presenting themselves very close to the central power in Bangkok, and the Udon Chinese not doing so, one thing that's very similar in the two museums is that both of them try to present themselves as a link, a connection with the People's Republic of China. In the museum in Yaowarat, there's one of the last displays is this room about His Majesty's benevolence or something. So there's an image of the king in the middle, and then on one side is a whole wall of images of members, high-ranking members in the royal family visiting Yaowarat and doing activities in Chinatown. The other side is the pictures of high-ranking members of the royal family visiting China and doing activities with dignitaries of the People's Republic of China. So it's very clear that the Chinese of Yaowarat, I think the message is that the Chinese of Yaowarat, the Thai Chinese, have very close, cordial relationship with the royal family. The royal family has very good relationship with the People's Republic of China, and so the Thai Chinese are also a link between the People's Republic of China with Thailand. And in Udon, they also do so, but they do so in a slightly different way. For example, they have a big, the biggest building in the museum complex is this hall that they use for the recital of the one and only full, complete Chinese orchestra in Thailand. And there's a big image of them winning prizes and playing on the Great Wall of China. And every time there's a Chinese dignitary coming to Thailand, the Udon Chinese Symphony has to go and receive them. And also another very interesting part is that the Udon Museum is divided into two parts. The upper part is about the history of the community that I said it looks like a who's who in Udon economic history. The lower part is the Confucius Museum. So it's about supposedly the teachings of Confucius, the history of Confucius, and pictures of like important sites in China that is related to the life of Confucius and the Thai Chinese of Udon, the leaders of the community going to visit these places. And it ends with the Confucius Institute. So in a way, it's sort of like presenting that the Chinese of Udon are culturally Chinese because they adhere to Confucian values, but not any Confucian values. It's Confucian values according to the Confucius Institute, which has become the flagship of Chinese cultural diplomacy in the 21st century. And therefore, they also present themselves as being very connected with the People's Republic of China and also capitalize through this relationship. So what I see is a very interesting, even though in terms of domestic politics, they might not see eye to eye all the time, the different Chinese communities, and the narrative of their history is also quite different. But one thing that has emerged to be quite similar is this claiming of a link with the People's Republic of China. And this leads me to wonder if the study of the history of the overseas Chinese, or even the studies of the Chinese diaspora in Thailand from now on is going to change quite significantly, because we used to look at the overseas Chinese in Thailand as the Tajiu, Hokkien, Hakka, Cantonese, different dialects, different clan names and all that. But now it's everyone's trying to use Mandarin, everyone's trying to claim connection with the People's Republic of China. And then I have a very, in my point of view, explosive question to end with, is that if you call the Chinese in Thailand or Chinese in Southeast Asia or Chinese anywhere in the world the Chinese diaspora, right? There's this idea that there's a Chinese diaspora. The very meaning of a diaspora, one of the meaning, the definitions of being a diaspora is that you are not connected with a nation state, right? It's a cultural group, right? So now in the 21st century, when we start seeing the trends of Chinese communities in Thailand identifying with the People's Republic of China instead of and kind of playing down their ethnic, dialect, cultural diversity, and instead moving towards identification with the People's Republic of China. Are we moving towards the end of a diaspora, or could we continue to consider this the diaspora? So I think I've gotten myself into enough trouble already, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, of course, you're talking incredibly short time periods. So it's 40 years since relations were normalized. The ASEAN, the inclusion of the communist states in ASEAN is only something that dates from about 97. So we have the perfect person in the form of Jeffrey Singh to tell us what went on a little bit further back, because this is a very, very long story, the relationship with the Thai Chinese. Jeffrey, why did you write this book?
Okay, it looks like the talks are going to be necessarily quite different. I've been asked by Nick Grossman to make some propaganda for the book, and he's got so many copies there that he's trying to move. So I will do my bidding, as Gwen has suggested, and talk about the Chinese present, the old stuff, maybe. But I will try to make it as interesting as possible. It is taken for granted that there is a very large Chinese presence in Thailand. This presence has become so assimilated that it's difficult to come up with a figure to represent the real size and dimensions of this Chinese community. Indeed, it's a challenge to point out someone who is 100% Thai today. This situation is not new. In fact, there has always been a large Chinese presence in the history of this country. We wrote that book, History of the Thai Chinese. Yeah? deals with the Chinese presence from the time of Ayutthaya. Interestingly, even at that time, Dutch and Portuguese writers had made similar observations that there was a very large Chinese presence in Ayutthaya. The Chinese was the largest foreign group in Ayutthaya. Next came the Moors. The Moors refer to the Persians, Arabs, and Indians in Ayutthaya. But the Chinese was by far the most numerous. Western traders said that wherever they went, the Chinese was always one step ahead. Skinner said that there must have been well over 10,000 Chinese in the city of Ayutthaya in the 17th century. So a large Chinese presence had reared its head in the 17th century. And more is to come. When peace and prosperity returned after the Burmese Wars, the population began to increase, and with it the size of the Chinese presence. By the late 19th century, the Western advisors to the kingdom like Warrington Smith, Campbell, and many others became alarmed at the large Chinese presence they saw. They predicted that the Chinese minority would displace the Thai as the dominant ethnic group in the kingdom. They warned that unless immigration is stopped, the Thai race would no longer be in existence in the near future. Of course, these views reflected the racial bigotry that was prevalent in colonial circles in the late 19th century. Racist doctrines like yellow peril swept across Western countries, and many Western governments enacted racially exclusive immigration laws to keep out the Chinese. Our Western advisors recommended that for their own good, the Thais should do the same. Interestingly, these anti-Chinese sentiments expressed by the Western advisors did not spread to mainstream Siamese public opinion, not immediately. They remained marginalized and contained within the expatriate community. But in the end, they did. After lying dormant for a long time, anti-Chinese sentiment began to influence the nascent Thai nationalist movement and fed into the ideology of Thai nationalism, which took an anti-Chinese character. Anti-Chinese sentiment was embodied in the writings of King Wachirawut. The most important is the Jews of the East, where he compared the Chinese to the Jews in Europe in a manner reminiscent of many Western writings of that period. So, in many ways, the rise of Siamese nationalism was a reaction to the ethnic preponderance and growing separateness of the Chinese community in Thailand. 4 factors contributed to this. One is Chinese control of the economy. In 1910, the Chinese launched a general strike to protest against the increase in the Chinese head tax by King Chulalongkorn. The Chinese general strike shut down Bangkok for 3 days. The strike became a wake-up call to the Siamese elite. It demonstrated that the Chinese controlled the economy completely and the wage labor force. Well, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, excuse me, I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
You have 4.
Yeah, you had 4.
You have four options.
Yes.
You've got to the first one.
Yeah. The next one is the rise of Chinese nationalism. The rise of Chinese nationalism was accompanied by the arrival of Chinese schools, Chinese newspapers, Chinese associations, and the presence of Chinese revolutionaries, refugees, and political activists. Bangkok became the hub of Chinese nationalistic politics in the region, as Republicans competed with pro-Manchu royalists for the loyalty of the Chinese community. Now, the next factor is the 1911 revolution. The 1911 revolution was greeted with euphoria in Bangkok. It created a strong sense of Chinese consciousness and reinforced a very distinct sense of being Chinese. So these factors began to contribute towards the growing separateness of the Chinese community. The last and most important was the emigration of women. One of the liberating effects of the Xinhai Revolution was the emigration of women. Before the 20th century, Chinese women never emigrated. Now, the arrival of Chinese women in Siam suddenly meant that Chinese men no longer married Thai women. Whereas before, the Chinese man married a Thai woman and he moved into a Thai family. And the children of the Thai family became Lukjin. Now the Chinese man married a Chinese woman and he established a Chinese home. With the Chinese home came the Chinese child. So the Chinese child began to replace the Lukjin of old. Furthermore, the Chinese child no longer spoke Thai. He spoke Chinese. And his educational orientation became directed by his Chinese parents towards China instead of Siam. So, the emigration of women put a stop to the age-old process of Chinese assimilation into Thai culture and society. Suddenly, the Thais began to see the Chinese as aliens in their midst, living in inassimilable, separate Chinese communities whose loyalties to the host country was suspect. So, the stage was set for the clash of nationalism, Chinese nationalism and Thai nationalism. The clash came to a head with the rise of the People's Party and the Japanese invasion of China. Japanese military aggression against China galvanized the Chinese community and resulted in a tremendous outpouring of support for China's war of resistance against Japan. The Chinese community, led by the Tattoo Association and other leaders, bought Chungking government war bonds and sent large sums of money back to support China's war effort against Japan. Communist groups and Ang Yi secret societies organized a boycott of Japanese goods and targeted Japanese businesses in Thailand. But when Pipun allied with Japan, suddenly the host government and its Chinese community found themselves facing off in opposite camps. During the wartime, Chinese newspapers and Chinese schools were closed and many Chinese leaders were arrested. Under threat of dreadful punishment by the Japanese secret police, the Kempeitai, the Chinese community was forced to collaborate and cease all anti-Japanese activities. Those who refused went underground and later joined the Free Thai anti-Japanese resistance. At the end of the war, Japan was defeated. China emerged as a great power and joined the United Nations. Thailand established diplomatic relations with China for the first time, and Chinese immigration was resumed. In the immediate post-war, large numbers of Chinese came over to escape poverty and war-torn conditions in China. To conclude, what is truly remarkable is that despite all the ups and downs, the clash of nationalisms, and the tensions between the host government and the Chinese community, the Siamese never adopted the racial exclusion policies advocated by the early Western advisors like Warrington Smith. Thailand always maintained an assimilationist policy and never shut the door to Chinese immigration, except for the short window under the Pibun government. Ironically, it was not the Thais, it was the Chinese who did that. In 1949, Communist armies swept to victory in Beijing. The new Communist government of the People's Republic of China soon installed an isolationist policy and forbade Chinese citizens from emigrating abroad. For the first time, the Chinese community found itself cut off from its ancestral homeland. Unable to renew its cultural, ideological, economic, and communal contacts with the homeland, the Thai Chinese community gradually began to shed its Chinese identity and eventually assimilated completely to its newfound Thai identity. When the famous Thai journalist Kavi from The Nation saw the cover of the book with the title, The History of the Thai Chinese, he said, there is no such thing as Thai Chinese, we are Thai. Thank you.
On that note, Pimprapai, the co-author of this book, can you show us what these Thai Chinese who didn't exist, according to Gawe? No, this is before that. Just take a look at what they've got. Is it running?
Yes, it's. I'll operate it using this. But tonight, actually, I prepared some shot for you. I'm the leisure, or the so-called the art page, to relieve you of all this political analysis earlier. So from now on, you can sit back, order another glass of beer, and relax and enjoy. But before I do that, let me just add something which I feel very important about this book. I think about as a good wife to Jeffries, I always have to think about economics, And I must admit that during the early part of the 20th century, the drain from the Thai economics back to China was real. People sent huge loads of money back to China, the Thai Chinese community. But after the bamboo curtain fell and China became communist, of course, they got stuck here. And the more important thing that I think that deserves some studies is the fund that this group of very talented Chinese earn. It is actually the foundation stone of Thailand. What these people, the wealth that these people created, and they created and they cannot send it back to China during the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, someone need to do that study, which is not me, of course. I'm the leisure pledge. So let's begin. Okay, now how do we identify what does the Thai Chinese community look like? Of course, we can identify from the artifact. You see the cannon there, that's recovered from Ratburi. It shows that the community is also aggressive community. It has its own power. It's not just coming as a meek migrant, but you have this secret society, self-defense weapons, and all these bowls of Ming and Sung prove the age. Moreover, it could create art that you never know. This is a lime pot ordered by Ayutthaya court. mimicking the lime pot here. Actually, the ceramics, make-to-order ceramic of the Thai Chinese community predated the Peranakan ware of Malacca and Singapore. This is an 18th century ware. Of course, we have the king. I mean, I'm very proud of this picture. So, it's King Taksin, the Luke Jin who become king of Siam. And how do they dress? What does the Thai Chinese look like? Ajahn Vasana, this doesn't come from Bangkok. It comes from Suphanburi, paintings. And it was pointed out by Ujiye, who is Kun Panadda there, over there, the ex Panadda over there. Ujiye is Panadda's father. Now, when Ujiye come here, he said, well, the Thai Chinese, one thing that take me by surprise is they don't wear shoes. All Chinamen everywhere else wear shoes. They would wear their wooden shoes, in Java, in Singapore. But here, you see, he doesn't wear shoes. None of the Thai Chinese in Thailand, local, doesn't wear shoes. They take after the Thai who also doesn't wear shoes, even in court. This จ้าพระยานิกรบดินทร์อึ้งเต๋าโต actually is like the prime minister of Thailand during Rama the third, Rama the fourth. He is the right-hand man of King Rama the third. That's how he looked like. When he go to court, that's how he goes to court. He is every inch a Chinese man. This is the founder of the Kalyana which is big, beautiful temples in Thonburi. And the picture is actually somewhere in Isan. The Thai Chinese community is headed by Priya Shoduk. Priya Shoduk, there's several of them. The one wearing Chinese is Chotika Pukana, Chotika Satien, Chotika. So many Shotika, all the Shotika. Who are they? They are the head of the Chinese community, or what the European or the Dutch would call Kapitan China. Kapitan China is who? It's like Kosinga. It's like, is the leader of the local self-help community. But in Thailand, they dress like that. Now, this is my forefather, my great-grandfather. You can see that he could be both Chinese and Thai. Actually, he was given a nobility title in Thai court and in Chinese court. But at the king's birthday, the king of Siam birthday, he would wear that on the right. And 18 of these Chinese noblemen who has been ennobled by the Qing court would walk into the palace and ถวายอังติ้วนะคะก็คือ they would go and wish the king happy birthday in Chinese custom. And these Chinese Mandarin custom has to be sent from China. เล่ากีปริงพยาพักดีพัทรากร is the tax farm. My family come from tax farmer. Tax farmer are like concessionaire. He is the largest opium concessionaire, and I just love, what he wear. This picture you could get it from the National Museum. The hairstyle with the pigtail in the back and the panung. The merchant look like this. All these are very rich merchant in Sampeng. That's how they dress. The family, that's the Hun Takun family. It's now this is another pictures of King Rama the Fourth dressed in Chinese Mandarin costume, and of course Sayai Chodik, Chotika Pukana, and on the lower left-hand corner down here is from the Sethabut family archive. The funny thing about these costumes is that if you have a China expert coming in and you wanted to know what are they wearing, none of the Chinese expert would be able to tell you what rank these people are. You know why? Because it's not a Qing court costume. It is the Siamese called Chinese costume. Nah. And, to thank, who to thank but the European. When the European come in and sign that barring treaties, you have this so-called extraterritorial rights. And all the Chinese suddenly wanted to be protected. So they run after the European flag and become British subject, French subject, Portuguese subject, and the American subject is for sale in Bangkok. You could buy that. Anyone can just walk up to the embassy and say, I want to be protected. I want to be American subject, and you pay under the table, and there you got a license. So what happened was that the King Rama IV and Priyachodik Rajasethi has to protect the Chinese inflow under the umbrella of Western influence. So Priyachodik came out with a scheme where he set up the Chinese tribunal court, and all the law and legal practice of what is practiced in China will be judged. So if you're Chinese and you fight among themselves, you do not go to you go to the Chinese tribunal court, and it is settled in Chinese tradition. For example, if you have a son and a daughter, all your wealth, according to Chinese, would of course go to the son. But if you have a son and a daughter in Thailand, the inheritance say that it has to split between the two, because Thai ladies has every single right equal to the men. So now Priyachodik has to set up this court. And what does he do? He not only set up the court, but he set up the costume, the Chinese custom, to go with it. So this is the on the lower right-hand corner is the costume of Palat Jin, and that is Pra Prani Jin Pracha Tien Jin Sethabut, who is a relative of mine. And on the right-hand side is a Thai dressed up as a Thai nobleman, his brother. So that's just to compare. So when you want to do this sort of thing, the history and actually what appears in the community ties together. And this is their home. Their home on the right-hand side is the Jatika Wanit, and the Posiya Jinda home called So Heng Thai. Actually, the forefather is also the forefather of Kun Anand here. He came in during the... because he's a forefather of Kun Ying Kulab, Chotika Satien, and they come in during King of Thonburi time, and that's the home on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, that's the Sombat Siri home, the Hok Lok Siu, Ti Thanon Sathorn. I'm sure if you are above 60, you see it. It's what's Bayer, where the site of the present Bayer Thai. So that's the Sombat Siri home. The Sombat Siri actually is the person who was responsible for creating the sugar industry in Thailand. Not many people know that. Now, how do they look? I mean, the Peranakan has come out with numerous books, beautiful golden embroideries. And you know what the Chinese Peranakan look. But when you talk about the Thai Chinese, there is no picture of what the Thai Chinese look like. I told you, this is the first generation daughter of the Wang Li daughters. So actually, if you have a girl, they all almost immediately become Thai because they look everything like a Thai. But look at the boy. Look at the boy on the right-hand side. That is the one with the hat. He's still wearing Chinese costume. That is Kun Bantun Lamsam grandfather. Now, however, when you're a boy, I'm talking about second generation, just now that was a girl. But if you're a boy, if you're a 7-year-old, you get sent to China, you have to learn Chinese, you have to become Chinese. And this is one generation. This is a third generation Wang Li grandson. Every inch is Chinese because connection with China is the main survival of the Chinese community in Siam. So if you have a boy, you see the way they dress, every inches they have to become Chinese. This is second brother Hong. Again, the same thing. If you look at the woman, they're all dressed in Thai in the Thai Chinese Jongkaben, all of them. All of them, they wear Jongkaben. But if you're a man, you can never lose that identity. The Wang Tan, that's from Ban Pong. Again, they wear Jongkaben. On the left side, Pakdi is from Surat Thani. The largest Chao Paul of Surat Thani is also Jongkaben. And incidentally, he's a Praya. This is Praya. The said Pakdi was appointed Priya by King Rama VI. So when you talk about whether the king was really anti-Chinese, the answer is maybe not, because he has appointed the Chinese to the high ranking of Priya. This is the Lam Sam and the Wang Li, and they all dress the same, the men's and the women's. Now, when you come to the 20th century, the Chinese look different. The Chinese, this is what Jeffrey is talking about in terms that you have a Chinese home. On the right hand side is the Pon Prabha family, and on the left hand side is the Chok Watana family, Sai Pin and her mother. This is almost the last pictures. Now the interesting thing about Sai Pin's mother is that she dressed every inch the Chinese. She came to Siam with her father, and then when he got old, the family returned. Sai Pin's mother married a goldsmith who was Sai Pin's father. She stayed there, gave birth to Kun Sai Pin and the rest, several daughters. And then funnily enough, she decided that I can't live in China anymore. And the reason is that because I haven't born my husband a son. So what she does is she convinces her husband that this is not a society which I would like to live, even though she dressed like a Chinese. She came home to Thailand, and she arrived in Thailand, give birth to more daughters, and in the end, after 20 years of difference, gave birth to Kun Direk Darakanon, who was the first son born, but she was Damrit, sorry. Damrit. So, that is something, in not just the way they dress, but it's the Thai Chinese community has a certain position for the Thai, for the woman in this society. And Ajahn Thapon, my professor, said that, well, we are very lucky. And the last pictures, the book launch. We say that the Thai Chinese has lost its Chinese identity. And so Nick has invited them to a book launch, and here this is what they look like. So I'm not so sure if they have really lost that Chineseness after all. So that's all for my fashion page.
We have a returning panelist. No, we'll just hear quickly from you. So Chris Baker, bring us up to date on business developments.
Oh, no. This is wonderful. I have enjoyed all of these, and I actually think I should just say how much I enjoyed them and shut up. But maybe they've bought me 2 glasses of beer, so I should probably. I should repay a little bit. The long story of Thailand is that you've always been here with this big empire of China just over your back of your right shoulder. And it's been that way since any records have been produced. So there's always been this flow of Chinese people, Chinese culture, Chinese goods into this area for at least 1,000 years. But there was a sort of change in this that came about from about 100 years ago onwards, when China got into real difficulty under colonial rule and a kind of ecological crisis as well. And so you've got this big immigration, a much bigger immigration into Thailand, into Siam, than you'd ever had before, between about the 1870s through to the 1940s. A much bigger flow here than you'd ever had before. So there's been a kind of difference in the assimilation, or whatever you want to call it, of what Jeffrey was talking about just now. Very big difference in this period from what you've ever seen before. And I want to talk about something quickly that is beyond, a little bit different from what they have been talking about and what is in the book, in fact, which is a great book. And it's partly about the importance of the book, about what has happened over this past generation, over the last 30 years, what has happened about the Thai Chinese in Thailand. And if you go back 30 years, if you go back to the 1980s, then the Thai Chinese means what is the story that is told in this book. It's about the businessmen. It's about the big families who are the Jiaosur, who are the big trading families. And it's not so much told in the book, but it's also about the guys in the shop houses along the street selling you noodles and everything else. You know, it's about that. It's about business. But there's been a huge change over this past generation. If you, and this generation that is kind of sort of born around 1960 and is now running Thailand, you know, because they're now in their 50s and their 60s and they're the people in the elite. And over this period between this sort of from then to now, there was this massive expansion in education. If you go back to 1980, there's 2 million people in Thailand who've got a university degree. If you go now, there's 8 million. So you've added 6 million people in just one generation. And a huge portion of those, a much larger proportion than they are in the population, come from families which have some kind of Chinese heritage. Why, I'm not going to talk about, but that happens to be a fact. So if you talk about the Thai Chinese in 1980, you talk about business. If you look across the swathe of the sort of the elite of Thailand today, if you talk about lawyers, if you talk about doctors, if you talk about teachers, if you talk about university professors, you talk about judges, you know, you talk about MPs, a vast majority of all of these have some kind of Chinese heritage. Someone once estimated that amongst MPs it's about 80%. And if you go back beyond, you know, the current government, back to Kunanan, they're all Chinese. All the prime ministers are basically Chinese. So, you know, how does this kind of come about in this way? And really, sort of what does it mean? But also, if you look in another way at this last generation, this last 30 years, you go back to the beginning, you go back to 1980, the Chinese at that time, and there's lots of records of this, still felt they were being discriminated against in Thailand. They still had this, there was still this effect of the Thai nationalism that Jeffrey was talking about last night. There were certain disabilities on the Chinese. They couldn't get certain jobs and so on and so forth. They didn't feel, you know, they felt they were still being discriminated against. They weren't fully Thai or whatever that meant. And particularly, they were feeling that they did not have a place in the history. If they looked at the history of Thailand, it was written in the history books. It said the Thai race came from somewhere in Mongolia. It migrated along to Thailand. It was settled here. You can't see the Chinese. There's no, you know, you look through this history. There's no sign of the Chinese at all. And when I started writing newspaper articles here, which was almost exactly 20 years ago, one of the first ones was called A Cultural Revolution in Thailand, which is about some Chinese intellectuals several of them, trying to reclaim a place for the Chinese in the history. And that was basically 20 years ago. And now they run everything, right? Okay? So you have gone from this position where you were sort of the business and so on, you felt discriminated against, to where you run everything within a generation. And this is, I mean, I'm not trying to sort of racialize it. This is an extraordinary story, you know, in any sense of the thing. And it has some extraordinary effects on the public culture of Thailand too. I'll just give two examples. I mean, one is that the Thai you will hear spoken today is not the same as the Thai you hear spoken 20 to 30 years ago. It's been enormously changed. All of the sort of sharp, if you listen to the kids today, anyone under the age of about 30, you know, they've lost all the sharp, hard consonants in Thai. They've all been turned, k has been turned into h, you know. They also speaking through their nose, like this. They no longer speak through their mouth. They aspirate everything, they drop in glottal spot stops. So the language has changed quite extraordinarily within 20 to 30 years. One of the other things that's changed really interestingly is the ideal of beauty. You know, and this is very real. At the time we're talking at the beginning of this, I was working here in an advertising company. And actually, Kumpimprapai was my landlord in the company. I would sit in these casting sessions for adverts, right? And these lovely girls or boys would come up, and people would say, no, too Chinese. Looks too Chinese, looks too Chinese. That was the way, you know, you couldn't have anyone who looks too Chinese. So at that time, what happened was that all the models that appeared as film stars and everything, they had to have this very strange look, which is a mixture between Asian and European. So basically came from Lukung, people, often a lot of mix between Filipino and other things. And then suddenly, and this was sort of early 90s, it suddenly became acceptable. Suddenly these people who we were rejecting suddenly became acceptable. And about 2 years later, de rigueur. And if you look now across whether you're talking about adverts, you're talking about models on catwalks, in fashion, in adverts, or you're talking about the stars on the soap operas, or you're talking about Miss Thailand, these sweet little features, which are nowhere near the kind of Southeast Asian features of the big eyes, the big mouth, the big nose. No, they're very gentle and soft and very, you know, sort of fair face and so on. The ideal of beauty has changed out of sight within about 20 years. And I think historically this is very interesting, partly because looking at things in the past. So, you know, things change here culturally. The cultural change that has come about, it's partly because of the rise of China. It's all sorts of kind of other things have gone into it. But it also shows why this book that Kumpimprapai and Jeffrey have published is also a kind of historical monument as well for what it means. Thank you.
Now, we're running quite slow. It's all my fault. But we do, as usual, have a microphone in the middle of the room. So anybody who'd like to ask a question, please jump up and ask a question. Whilst that's happening, I'm going to throw a question at anybody who'd like to answer it on. We have this pivot going on in Asia with the US in kind of regressive mode. And we have an until recently very powerfully surging China economically coming forward. And at the moment there's a bit of wobble on the China development. But is there a relationship? Is the US's decline anything to do with this upsurge? Some people there. Does anybody want to answer that question? Wasana, I think you're probably the best qualified actually.
Okay. Is the U.S. seemingly decline?
This change of superpowers that's going on, is that playing any role in what you were describing?
Uh, why do I have to be the one to talk about politics all the time?
You don't.
Yeah, but I mean, they came here last week, so they probably won't come again this week, right? I seriously think that is the way that China deals with international relations, and this idea that came up seemed to take the front stage at Bandung is now continuing to take the front stage in Chinese PRC diplomacy, and this like non-interference diplomacy is still being used, and you see it in the major moves, and one of the major international organizations that is on the rise now, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with Russia and the PRC being the spearhead of this organization, is also very much into this non-interference idea. And I think, to make a long story short, is that Thailand and also quite a few countries in Asia and in many other parts of the world has recently seemed to be moving towards a direction that the kind of US approved world order does not approve of. So, and this, the basic bottom line of the US approved world order that I mean is democracy and human rights. I'm not saying that the US is a beacon of democracy and human rights. That's up for debate. But this is the party line that, you know, you have to have democracy and you have to respect human rights. And once you appear not to have democracy, and once you appear not to respect human rights, then you're disapproved by the US kind of Cold War world order. But that doesn't go with the new SCO, PRC, Russia kind of world order of non-interference. And so you start having, I think, you start having the tendency of non-democratic states to prefer to move or tilt towards the PRC for that reason. So I think I'll end at that before I get myself into more trouble.
Questions? Peter, quickly.
Peter Jansen, freelance journalist. Kun Wasana, you seem to be targeted tonight. I really liked your comparison of the museums, the overseas Chinese museums in Trimit and Udon. I wonder if I can drag this down into recent politics a little bit, yeah? I mean, you remember when the yellow shirts started coming out, Kun Sonti was talking about Lukjin and about the need to protect the sort of established Chinese business community here. They had no voice in politics and whatnot. I wonder to what extent you think, we tend to sort of say, oh, the recent political disputes have been between the urban and the rural. To what extent do you think it's been a fight between the Bangkok-based Chinese political elite and the rural-based Chinese political elite? Yeah, I mean, Chris, you can add to that too.
Please don't get me arrested. I actually have a slight disagreement listening to Ajahn Chris, with all due respect, in that when people like to talk about the assimilation of the Chinese in Thailand as a success story in Southeast Asia, right? I mean, compared to other places where you have like massacres and scary things happening, the Chinese in Thailand seem to have had it pretty easily. And people try to explain it with different ways, cultures, the economy, marriage, religion, and whatever. I tend to think that it is actually because the elite, the political elite in Thailand, and the business elite, the economic elite, are actually have very close relations, like so closely intertwined that it's difficult to like separate one from the other. So I kind of think that the central political and economic power in Bangkok, the elite in Bangkok are Chinese, and that's why they assimilate so well, or they don't have trouble, is because they are the elite, right? So whether or not they, I wouldn't want to go so far as to say that the rural base or the non-Bangkok base Chinese community are fighting with the. I'm not even ready to say that the Chinese in Udon are red and the Chinese in Bangkok are yellow, mostly because I don't want to be arrested, but also because I think the Chinese community in Thailand are extremely flexible and adaptive. So as I said, a year after the coup, immediately in the Chinese museum in Udon, they have a display of royal connections. And you go back today and you see it's expanding, and you see, so they're very fast to kind of, try to adjust to the change in the political situation. But the only thing I think is changing is that there are, since the dawn of this century, and actually since the end of the Cold War, there are more ways of the Chinese community outside of Bangkok and the Chinese community that does not necessarily have close connections with the central power in Bangkok to actually make it big and become somebody, to maybe perhaps even challenge the economic dominance of the old elite in Bangkok.
Chris, do you want to be arrested?
No, I mean, just to say, with all these very complex political movements that have emerged from the beginning of the 20th century, with this large movement of Chinese into Thailand, this business of assimilation, and then this complicated red-yellow politics that has emerged. What has been really striking here is that the conflict has never really been racialized, even in the time of a kind of Thai nationalism. And this, I think this is something to be celebrated, I mean, given when we look around the world and we can see whole countries and civilizations right now being torn apart by, differences between you hold this view of the religion and I hold this view of religion, and I have this race and you have this race. I mean, the way that this part of the world, not only Thailand, but with a few exceptions, most of this part of the world has managed to absorb this great complexity of origins is something to be praised.
Yes. Greg.
Khun Surin, I just wonder, in your book, you talk about how your father sent you and your brother to China, following the tradition of sort of smaller countries sending tributes to larger countries, and how you felt about the more difficult times when you were purged, when Zhao Enlai was put in prison. Do you feel it was worth the personal cost to you in terms of developing stronger relations between Thailand and China? And what was your opinion of what your father did in terms of sending you as political capital?
I think looking back on it, there were times that, especially after the Cultural Revolution, perhaps I resented it, because why it should be me, but otherwise, I think in the long run up to now, I was able to keep up the relationship with China for the last 60 years in the family, personal relationship with China. I mean, that means that we had started the relationship with China when China was very weak, very poor, very acceptable to the world at the time. We were the friends of China when no one was friends of China. And I think that was the value that my father had left to us all. And that is why we are lucky. I'm very lucky with my family that normally this kind of relationship, you would last probably, luckily from father to daughter, I would have finished it. I mean, if I didn't have the kind of like the 1972 function to be able to bring some success to our relationship with China, I probably would have stopped going to China and had it, call it a day. But somehow we were able to continue the relationship from me to my son and to our sons, and then I hope from his son to his sons. So we will have generation to more than 2 and 3 generations relationship with China. And thinking of China today, to be big power, and whether there would be big trouble for China in the future along the road, we stay kind of confident to China, a friend of China, someone they can always share their problem with us.
Hello, thank you for a very interesting panel. My question is to do with Thai-ness. We've talked a lot about assimilation of the Chinese into Thai-ness, but I wonder what the effect on Thai-ness has been of the Chinese. We've heard a little bit from Chris about that in popular culture in recent decades, but even the early ideologues of ideological Thai-ness were nearly all part Chinese, and in more recent times we've got a lot of Thai-Chinese patriots who are almost more Thai than thou in their defense of Thai-ness. And so I'd like to ask the panel what their view of just how Chinese Thai-ness is. It's a bit provocative, but have a go.
Thanks very much. Does anybody want to answer the question?
I think the fashionista should answer this question. I mean, I do the politics, so now that we get to the fashion, I think you should answer.
Well, actually, this thing about Thai-ness is a recreation. It's like if you are in advertisement, you create a certain propaganda, you create a certain image that you follow through. Thai-ness is, I think I agree with Chris that in the past, perhaps 10 years or more or whatever, there's this, the movement to create the Thai-ness is not just among the Chinese community, but it's throughout, it's trying to recreate the history. I'm also helping Ajahn Sunet to work on Ayutthaya history, and a lot of it is that people read about is a sort of a recreation of Thai-ness. So it's a fashion not only among the Chinese Thai, but the whole community. And the whole community is watching Naresuan. It's a must watch, that sort of thing. So it's, I don't know. But coming back to whether we are Chinese or not, my generation is not so Chinese. In fact, I have even doubt whether the Chinese Thai community is competitive in the Chinese stage, as it's called. Because during my grandfather's generation, we are bilingual. We could speak Chinese, we could speak Thai, but no longer in our generation. What does the Thai Chinese do? Probably a few go back to China. But I mean, you look at Central, they go and buy what? German department store? That's the Thai Chinese, is it? I mean, Italian department store. I mean, now we are competitive in the world stage. So, you know, whether we create the Thainess as a campaign for Central Embassy, you know, living area in the Central Embassy, but the world has become so much so that it is left, in my opinion, to the advertising and the script writers. I'm sorry about that. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, last question.
I have a question for the whole panel. One small but significant portion of ethnic Chinese migration that I haven't heard discussed yet is the Kuomintang soldiers who ended up in northern Thailand. And I'd like to hear the panel's opinion on how that group has been integrated into Thai society and how that contrasts with previous waves of ethnic Chinese migration and what that tells us about the role of culture versus politics in integration with Thai society.
Kuomintang. Jeffrey, would you like to?
Well,
I'm sure you wouldn't.
Actually, the person who covered that in our book is now in Oxford, Ajahn Masana, a student who helped me to research on the whole thing. But Kun Jeffrey, in order to write this book, has read the whole new book. What is that called? That's a very good book.
There's a book, very interesting new book. It's called The Secret Army. It's about the losing forces of the Kuomintang who retreated in the wake of the advance of the PLA. So they were cut off from the main force of the Kuomintang who went with Chiang Kai-shek to Taiwan. So they were forced to go into the back door and they crossed the Burmese border, and they became like a state within the state at the border area, covering the Burmese border and also spillover in Thailand. The leader was a Chinese general called Li Mi, who used to be quite close to Chiang Kai-shek. And the book is called The Secret Army. And in the early days, the US began to change its policy, but in the early days, Chiang Kai-shek hoped to return and attack China again. And in the early days, the Americans supported that view. So they supported and supplied the Kuomintang army at the border areas. And in fact, there was some planned invasions, which was carried out with the support of the Americans. They went back into Yunnan and tried to, take on some positions. But they were no match for the PLA, and they were quickly, pushed back. But they became a problem both for the Burmese as well as for the Thai, and contributed to actually the weakening of the UNO government. So in some ways, the rise of the Burmese military was also a result of the security situation contributed by the KMT forces in the border area, because the Burmese, having to deal with it, came to rely more and more on the military. So the military became stronger and stronger in Burma at the expense of the civilian government.
Please do.
I mean, I think this is a sort of minor part of the story, but it's quite an interesting part. About 20 years ago, I went on a trek from Pai in Mae Hong Son. We walked for 4 or 5 days up through towards the Burmese border and around a big circle. And our guide was one of the Kuomintang soldiers. He's one of the guys who had, come across in that period. And he was very happy, he was very happy with his life. He lived in this village there, and he had a job guiding trips like ours, very little. And then maybe about a year ago, went up to north of Chiang Rai, and to one of these villages where they settled up there, And you can drive through the market there, and there's Chinese signs and everything else. They're still there. So it's kind of, yeah, okay, you know, you're here. You know, it's okay, it's fine. We won't make a big problem about this. You know. It's a little thing.
Well, I think on that note, we'll wrap it up. It's rather interesting to have a room full of foreigners discussing. Not all of us are Chinese and or have Chinese blood, but one of the great qualities of Thailand is that it does assimilate people. It inspires great affection and loyalty in them, and you know, it's also very hard to understand. I know that because I'm working on a project that's killing me. But
Jeffrey, can I just add one last word? Sorry to
I'm Dominic,
interrupt.
but yes, you can.
You know, in China now, we talk about Thai Chinese. Now, I would like to say about Chinese Thais, because the most popular soap opera in China is Thai soap opera. They're followed by millions and millions in China nowadays. And also the Chinese women would like to look Thai.
Oh. There you are.
Having to slit their eyes. Yeah.
Well, anyway, it brings me back to the point. We need more books like this, The Dragon's Pearl and The History of the Thai Chinese, to help us navigate these enormous subjects, which we just dipped our toes in it tonight, caused a bit of confusion at times, but a lot of fun. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Kun Sarin, Kun Wasana, Jeffrey, Prim Papai, Chris Baker, and thank you, Kun Anand, for overseeing us.